Here we go.
Yeah. All
All
right,
right.
perfect. So, super. Technical problems out of the way. I can hear you, you can hear me, so that's what's important, okay?
Great stuff. Yes. Hello.
Um, hello, hello. So, thank you so much for making it to episode 3 of Shimika Conmigo. I appreciate you making the time to talk with me, okay?
Great stuff. How do I say your name actually? I was just thinking I don't want to mispronounce your name.
It's a bit of a tough one. I think I'm going to make a YouTube video telling people how to pronounce my name. Zambians can't pronounce my name. Spanish
Can
people, my parents, they didn't think this through, you know. It's In'utu. In'utu.
In'utu.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, good, 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 good. You got it. You got it. You got
Eh,
it.
what tribe is
Um,
that? That's interesting.
it. I'm part Lozi, part Bemba. I think way better Lozi than I do Bemba.
Yeah.
But then the last couple of years not being in Zambia, I think I'm just claiming there. I'm just making statements, and my mother is going to be like,
Lost
nah,
child.
no, your Lozi is, your Bemba
Questionable.
even worse. So yeah, that's the tough part. Yeah.
Awesome. Yes.
Um, So I love that you just posted on your IG the flyer for this interview when you talked about your
My
heritage
e-
being questioned, you
ex-
know.
exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, I have a whole host of questions. I'm going to be looking down. So
Yes.
if you see me doing that, it's because I don't want to go off a tangent,
Yes.
okay? There's
Exactly.
real danger of that happening. So I will start over. Thank you so much for making it to Shimika Conmigo episode 3. We will do this live on IG, but I will take down the video, edit it, and put it on my YouTube video, and then share it with you and everyone else who might miss this live IG, okay?
Fantastic. Sounds
I
good.
will just get into my first question if that's okay, okay? Um, Tell us a little bit. Who is Hannah Uzor? I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Give us a
Yes.
brief intro so people get to know you, just in case they don't already know you, and you could address the heritage question.
I will. So, my name is Hannah Uzor. That's my married name, but I was born Hannah Haschimbwe. So, I was born in Zambia, Lusaka. Both my parents are Tonga. As I grew up in Lusaka,
Walumba basta.
I think you're speaking more Tonga than I know right now. No, I'm not that bad,
So
to
proud
be
of
honest.
myself.
I'm
Nah.
not that bad. But yeah, so I
Yeah.
grew up in Zambia. My parents, from the time I was 2, they could tell that I was really, gifted in art. So they always encouraged me to draw and to paint. And I did that throughout like secondary school, just throughout my entire, like upbringing. And then I think by the time I finished high school, and I was like, I wanted to be an artist. So that year in between before you do anything, just after you finish your grade 12, and you just like, I spent the whole year at Zambia National Arts Council,
Oh,
painting, drawing, attending workshops,
oh wow.
and my dad was like, well, you can't just be an artist. This is Zambia. You have to do something serious. So that was it. So I sort of started doing. I went to what is it, Zikas? Yeah, I went
Yeah.
to Zikas and I did 2 years of an IT course there, and then I left in 2003 to come to
Hmm.
England to do the final year of my degree in computing. So I have a degree in
Okay.
computing, and
Okay.
yeah. So in that sort of span of time, I still wanted to be an artist. You still have this dream that you have inside of you. I want to be an artist, and I was in and out of art during that sort of years of being
Yeah.
event seekers. I went to the Alliance Francaise. They used to have lots of competitions and exhibitions. So I spent time in that world, because at that
Yeah.
time my French was absolutely fluent, So we spent a
Oh
lot of
wow.
yeah, we spent a lot of time there doing exhibitions, doing shows. Then I came to the UK and had to sort of find myself again, find myself in the art
Yeah.
world. I sort of, got caught up in just living here in England, getting a career,
Yeah.
getting married and dipping in and out of art, as much as I could. up until
Yeah.
about 3 years ago when I said, you know what, forget all of this, hustling. Let me go back to my first love. Let me go back to arts. And I did that. That was the big change 3 years ago when I quit it all and started to focus on
Oh,
art.
wow.
So that's a bit of
I'm
a background, yeah.
okay. Thank you so much. I mean, it probably was hard for you, but I'm sort of, I'm really grateful. I'm thankful that you decided to quit what you were doing and focus on the art, because if you hadn't, we wouldn't be talking about what we're going to be talking about now. So
Exactly,
thank
yeah.
you for that. Thank you for that intro, for the Zambia bit, for how the UK is connected, how Nigeria is connected. Thank you so much. Um, so when I was looking up, trying to learn about you, I found that you are a multimedia artist. Yeah, you do painting, film, music. Is that a fair description of you? Multidisciplinary artist? What? I mean, I don't want to put you in a box. So, how would
Yes.
we describe you?
I think at the moment it's fair to say that I'm multidisciplinary at the moment. Even though my
Okay.
current project sort of has been based primarily on portraiture, so the
Okay.
figurative. But yes, before I sort of plunged into the art world, I was involved in the music scene here in the UK. I
Mm-hmm.
had an EP out, as was doing a few gigs. That was the life back, before focusing on art. So I did that, and then getting into art again, I've tried to incorporate that in a little bit. So
Yeah.
obviously we're talking about historical figures. So these
Yeah.
figures have stories, and in trying to depict their stories to a wider audience, I use
Mm-hmm.
portraiture, but at the same time, I think with Sarah Forbes, I also did a little film about her and tried to incorporate that music aspect of it. I didn't do any singing, but I just did like
Oh,
some sort of drum sounds and some music context towards this little film that I created. It was a scene of her life. So I put that out
I
on
didn't
it's on
know
my
of.
YouTube page.
Okay, yeah, I will go and watch, because I mean I found you on YouTube, but I didn't have time to watch the content. So excited to be sharing this link that goes
Yes.
with the movie and I mean, with the movie, no, with the painting. I'm too
Yes.
excited. I'm such a fangirl, of the people I interview. I only interview people I like, so, or admire, sorry. So forgive me for getting all fangirly. Yeah. Um,
Yes.
Out of these three things that you've done or you are doing, what do you enjoy the most? Painting, film, or music? I think I'm figuring out painting because you said it was your first love. So,
Yeah.
um,
It has to go back to painting and maybe the basic drawing, really, because before you can paint, you have to draw first. So I think I'm going back
mhm.
to drawing. I think as a young in my younger days, I always had a conflict between, what is my first love? Is it music? Is it art? I always used to battle between the two. And I think as I've
Yeah.
found now, I think initially I had a season where I was heavily focused on music. And I think now I've gone back into the arts. And I think I'm
Yeah.
slowly finding a way to incorporate the musicality of it into my practice. Because right now I'm still learning how to play the piano, actually, which I've been doing for a few years now. So I think there will be a
Yeah.
time when there's a crescendo of those two elements of of creative ability into this big piece, into maybe some immersive sort of exhibition or an immersive installation where you have portraiture mixed in with a soundscape. So I think,
Yeah.
but going back to what I love the most, I think is just the basic thing of just drawing, drawing when you're up and about. And I think the whole point is trying to capture the essence of a human figure and trying how to convey that to a
Yeah.
different audience. So I like that about being technical and just taking
Oh.
pen and paper and just drawing.
I love how you know the simplicity, drawing, pen and paper. Any kid or anyone listening can be like, oh, it doesn't have to be so complicated. Like my pen and my paper could work. Um,
Exactly.
how I'm gonna ask you now about the big story that broke the news that, for example, I caught somebody tweeted and then I saw, and then I also followed up. And how did you get chosen to work on a commission for English heritage? How did that happen?
Well, I think when I sent my post out, it's when preparation meets opportunity. Now, you know that I just talked about me going back to school, me making this big decision in my life to go back to school. And one of the driving
Yeah.
forces behind that was to be connected with a network of other creatives and have somebody to be a critical voice in my practice. So during
Mm-hmm.
this process, you could say I kind of found myself in what I wanted to convey and in what I wanted to speak about. Obviously, living in
Yeah.
England as now, as I tell in some articles I've written, when I moved to the UK was the first time I recognized that I was black. You know, I didn't have that sort of awareness growing up in Zambia. Everyone is black. You don't really think about your identity in that sort of context. You know, you just go about your
Exactly.
own life. You know, but coming
Yeah.
into the UK and then there's risk recognition of you have to tick a box that says your ethnicity, black, African, black, this. So you're being constantly pushed with this narrative that you're black, you're black, you're black. And so there was a new way of trying to rediscover my sort of blackness, if that makes any sense, you know, and to find my blackness in this white space, you know, this European setting. Um, and so that journey into finding myself led me into doing a lot of research on Black British presence here in England. And I did a lot
Yeah.
of research around that. I read David Onsogo's book, Black and British, which I think is such a fantastic reference for any Black person here in the UK or even
Mm-hmm.
in the global context, because it just speaks to the heritage of Black people from Roman times and, you know, way back when. So that helped me sort of
Yeah.
find, in a sense, find myself as a Black person. And I thought in reading those stories in that book, in those books and in that
Yeah.
research, Sarah Forbes' story popped out to me as a character that I wanted to portray. I thought her story was so fascinating. It had so many elements to it, so many layers to it. And I could not believe that my children who were going to school, at least my son in school, would not learn about her, you know, because he came home talking about Mary Seacole and all the famous people that they tend to focus on. But there was nothing like
Yeah.
Sarah Forbes. And I thought, well, she was, you know, Queen Victoria's goddaughter. This is a major story. And she was a Black person. So
Mm.
then I went about finding all these other characters and I picked Sarah Forbes' painting to be depicted. Now, while this
Yeah.
was happening, unknown to me, English Heritage was also working on a similar project, doing the exact same thing I was doing.
Oh.
They wanted portraits of Black people who had connections with their houses, and they wanted to bring those
Yeah.
to the limelight. So I'm working in
Oh,
my
wow.
corner doing this, and they are also working on this project doing that. So I finished my
Wow.
painting, and then
Yeah.
I get this, I think it was Instagram message or email saying,
Yeah.
we have this project, and Sarah Forbes is one of the characters we want to depict as in portrait form. You have a painting.
Yeah.
Can we work together? And that was basically how it happened, you know. So we sort of had some, you know, to and from discussions, you know,
Mm-hmm.
negotiations, and voila, that's sort of how the whole journey began.
Oh, wow. Thank you for sharing that, because you know the stories or the articles that are online don't talk about the fact that you were doing it. Obviously, English heritage, it's to their benefit, it's
Mm,
good press for them, but like they're sort of pushing it as, yeah, we commissioned someone to do work. They're not talking about how you had this interest, finding your identity. And
yeah,
like you, it's good that you mentioned living in Europe. When you're in Zambia, you're the Zambian woman, Zambian boy. But when you come to Europe, you're confronted with
yeah.
your Black African identity. So thank you for that. Thank you for that bit. Um, so I mean, you've talked about it a little bit, but what was it like to work? Like the process, start to completion. You said how you were interested in Sarah's story and it stood out to you, working on this portrait of Queen Victoria's goddaughter. Like, were you nervous? Were you like, oh, what are people going to think? What are they going to say? I love the portrait. Like, I love how it's huge. You were on Spanish TV the other day, because there's never any news about, well, any good news about Zambia. So, I knew you were Zambian. So I was like, oh, she's Zambian, she's Zambian, she's Zambian, like. So tell us, what was that process for you, like as an artist? Like, okay, you've chosen your subject, but then how did you get round to picking your colors, blah, blah, blah? I'll let you talk about it.
I think in her case, I think it was really important to pick something about her life that would really have a ripple effect in terms of her story. So this was a black woman, black Victorian time, wearing this elaborate dress, which is literally, you don't see many portraits of black women in that era wearing Victorian dresses. And so that was really the key aspect of, you could say, her story. You could say you didn't have to do a lot of things. You just had to put this black woman in a Victorian dress, and that would speak volumes. Because in most of the portraits of that time, and even just generally, if you look at art history, black characters are always positioned in a subservient manner. So they're always either in the corner, holding a flower, a servant, or, it's the typical, submissive sort of, ways in which they're cast, And so here was me elevating this black figure in such a high class manner. So that was obviously going to be a statement in itself, So I think for me, in reading her story, because I obviously I read David Olusogo's book, and then I would try to find other sources which they mentioned about her life, to see what was it that would be, and bear in mind, I was not just reading about her. I was reading about all other, a series of other, black figures in that historical time, and seeing how they lived and how they were also viewed. So there was still slavery going on in this time in England. Hold on, let me just get my dates right. I think they just abolished the slave trade, So but there were still slaves in England. There were still slaves in the colonies. There was still this slave, vision that people had of black people. So in a way, I was really key it was really key for me that I portrayed this black figure in an elaborate fashion, in a fashion of in elegance, and also in a confident manner, And it's, the good thing for me is I had this photographic reference, which was fantastic. And there were there's quite a series of her photographs anyway that she had taken during this, because the painting is based on a photo that she took on her wedding day. And so there were a series of photos that were done around that time. And I did a few studies of other poses, with her turning away, with her facing the camera. But this picture of her standing upright and seeing the full, glory of her dress in the Victorian dress was something that I thought, this is the statement. This will make all the difference in how I paint her. And now, what people don't know, most people wouldn't tell from actually seeing the paintings, that there's actually fabric on the painting. So the bottom half of her dress is actually got fabric on it. You can't really see that obviously in a photograph because everything looks flat. But after painting her, because her life and her story is all about the layers of her identity. Ex-slave. She was African royalty. Then she came and she was involved in the English aristocracy, and then she then married another rich Nigerian man. She had all these layers about her. She studied in Africa. She came back to England. She died in Spain. So there's so many things to her life, And I think I really wanted to show that sort of multi-layeredness of her life. And so I took this transparent fabric and I dipped it in glue. And it's quite transparent, and then I layered it on top of it. Now, once I finished the painting, it was such a struggle for me even to layer that piece of fabric on, because I'd never done it before. I'd done a few obviously experiments with it, but to finally complete the picture, it was, am I going to destroy it? Am I going to damage it? But once I finally put it on and it just set the way it did, it was the sort of, you could say, it was the thing that linked everything together, because I think I also wanted the audience to feel my tension when they see this fabric and they see the dress. They see there's a tension there. And I think with every black identity, there's always a tension. You find yourself in a certain space, there's a tension there. You know what I mean? You're an artist, here's an artist here in England. There's a tension there. There's always tension. There's always places as a black person that you get into in a European setting where you find yourself having to have these different layers of identity and having to have these experiences with, discomfort, and so that was something I wanted to bring out through the painting.
Oh, I'm so happy that you've broken down all of this aspect and the element of the bottom part of the dress, because I was looking at that and I was like, wow, this is a pretty impressive dress, but if you didn't tell me, I wasn't going to know that there was extra layers, and the fact that, you know, not only just because I read Sarah was from Sierra Leone. She got married to a Nigerian person. She died in Spain. I didn't know this. So, you know, you're adding layers and more stories to this character. Already, we don't have images like hers, like you've already said, and it's very powerful, very important, I think, especially in the time that we're living, because we're always talking about or debating the image of not the Hollywood, the Disney princess, you know. And they're always making these characters. It's because they don't research, but now they will have no excuse because they will have Sarah there that you've even brought to life for them. So they better credit you if they make a black princess Disney something, you know. But anyways, thank you so much for that. I want to ask you a few more questions. What did it mean to you? I mean, I think you've already touched on this, but what did it mean to you to be a Zambian, British, black female artist who was asked to do this painting or this portrait, you know? Because you talked about layers at the end there, you know?
I think for me, it was more, I was more interested in telling the story, you know, and I think my own blackness is not connected to the next black person down the street, you know, that there is a continuity in the narrative, you know. So, for example, Sarah, in her case, was living in England, sort of seemingly out of place, you know, involved the British royal family. And then here is me as a black female in England, still feeling out of place in some cases, you know, and having to negotiate, you said, my Britishness and my blackness all at the same time. And then I also have, I have children, and they will also be continuing that narrative, you know. And I think when I go out into galleries, into museums, and I'm all the time filled with, you know, all these images of black people in a subservient manner, that doesn't fill me with any form of joy or esteem, you know. And I want to be able to take my children to spaces where they can see positive images of themselves, you know, in these figures, you know. And if they go into a museum and all they see is black figures in a subservient manner, I mean, that does to you something to you psychologically, you know. If you're surrounded, especially in a Western environment where, you know, most people who have positions of power are white figures, then that's also that does something to you psychologically. But for them, it's really, for me, I'm more interested in what it does for the people coming after me, you know, because I feel like they need to be able to see something different than they're used to seeing. And I think that's sort of what it means for me is something to a different picture, a different image. And if there can be more images of Sarah, if there can be more artists doing more work, you know, getting interested in what goes into museums and how they can change what is in museums. And because obviously history is told by the conqueror, not by the conquered, you know, but we need to get involved in that process now. Say, look, we were here, there, you know, don't put us in the silence. We were very much part of the process. And in fact, you know, before, you know, you guys decided to burn down our kingdoms, we had great kingdoms. We had societies that were flourishing. You know, there's Mansa Musa, and all that heritage. You know, we don't have to go back all the way to Egypt. You know, there were so many great kingdoms. The Dahomey king, you know, that was, you know, obviously negotiation with Captain Forbes. That was a kingdom with a structure, with a monarchy and a system that was working, you know. So I think that sort of story, and that's sort of my driving force behind maybe doing those kinds of paintings, to be able to change the narrative and change the psyche and give a different point of reference in history to the people that come after us. I hope that answers the question.
Yes. I mean, it has. I'm a mother too, and you know, so when I saw your portrait, I'm thinking about myself also. I mean, as a woman, it's good to see the positive image of a black woman, you know, like you say, in this position of strength, of power, in her beautiful dress. So all of everything you say, I totally agree, and thank you for saying. Let's talk about you know, how support for Zambian artists or black artists in general, if there isn't, how do we change that? You briefly talked about what goes into museums, for example. You know, you mentioned that. So do you think there's enough support for Black artists, for Zambian artists? If not, how do we change that?
That's a very, very tricky question. And there's so many layers to it, because one thing you have to understand what the structures are at play in every context.
Yeah.
So, for example, in the Zambian artist context, there are different structures that are at play that I may not necessarily be fully aware of. I mean, I am part of like the Zambian WhatsApp group of arts, and they talk a lot about, maybe don't have enough government funding, not enough backing from the government, lack of patronage, in terms of artists out there. So in that context, I can't really speak so much to what is happening in Zambia, but on a broad scale, in terms of the Zambian arts in Zambia, is not really necessarily a hub of African art in itself. It's not the center, it's not like maybe Lagos or Cape Town or Johannesburg or even Nairobi. On the continent, there are big arts centers, but there's a reason why those places are like that. It's infrastructure, it's money, it's government backing, it's the people who are behind the patronage, the artists, the galleries. Whereas on the Zambian scene, we don't know why. There's so many issues as to why it's not like that, and that makes it very difficult. And obviously, because I left Zambia at a young age and was already plugged into fully. I was only, let's say, involved for about a year in the scene, as it were. So I can't really speak so much about what has happened over the last. Gosh, it's been like 20 years now. So, but here in the UK, the same thing goes for. It's quite a myriad of things here in the UK context, because there's first of all, there's your national heritage as an artist. So, for example, Nigerian artists would group or
hold on. Could you repeat that? Nigerian artists would?
I know that Nigerian artists have a Nigerian group, of artists that come together and do stuff as Nigerians. Here in England, because I was invited to something, they were sort of involved in, but by virtue of having a Nigerian surname, but
yes, Hannah, come.
But whereas here in England there is no corresponding, as it were, Zambian art, artists coming together. Maybe it's because there are very few of us, and the few that I've tried to connect with, I think one was an illustrator doing some of a different discipline, but in a sense there's a need for us to organize ourselves and sort of come together, as Zambian artists. So you could say in our context as Zambian artists, there's no infrastructure even here in the UK to be a sounding board. And then generally as Black artists, there's an even bigger battle to fight, as it were, because still Black artists are still on the back burner of the mainstream art world. They still are trying to find their way in that space, and a few people have managed to break through the ranks, the Yinka Shonibares, the Chris Ophelis, the Lubaina Himids, but they've had a long periods of working, here in England, from, let's say, the 80s, maybe that's what, when they were in their 20s doing a lot of stuff. I was, we were just not even born or just about to be born when these guys had started doing and fighting some of the same battles that we are beginning to fight now. So there is a myriad of issues around the Black arts here in the UK, and there's still that, you could say, fight for recognition in the mainstream. Some would argue that, we don't really need to be in the mainstream. Let us, have our own thing that we're doing. But so it's quite complicated, in that sense. I think that's probably as much I can sort of go into before I go down into really sort of the technicalities of of the various things that happen here.
No, I appreciate your response, touching on the aspect of Zambia, which, I mean, most of our audience will be Zambian, but I think it's also important to recognize that you are in the UK, you're a Black artist in the UK. There's also, there's layers to that also, and it's good that you give both perspectives, because that makes this richer, you know, because someone would just have one-sided view, and that wouldn't really be complete, because you're an artist. Yes, you have Zambian heritage, but you're doing your work in the UK.
Yeah.
Can I ask you my next question?
Sure. I'll just
I
try to
think
make just a water.
it's 3 more questions, and then I will let you go. Okay. So let's talk about the business of art. You know, you have an online print shop, which I have fallen in love with. I love your work on there. Show called Afritistic. Okay. What inspired you to open it, while showcasing the prints that you have put on it? What's the inspiration, you know, behind the look and the feel of the content or the product that you sell on your online store?
Okay, so my online store, I try to keep it very much separate to my fine art artistic practice.
Okay.
So it's almost like I pretend that that's not me.
Your alter ego, your Sasha Fierce comes out if you're a Beyonce. Sorry, terrible, poor reference. Sorry.
But I think like I said to you, I mean, I started to 3 years ago. I started to quit my job, you know, and what I was doing.
Oh.
I needed I needed some income. I needed some that would work for me while I, you know, pursue my art. Because anyone before you become big and rich and famous as an artist, it's really expensive being an artist. It's really, there's materials to buy, you know, and those materials are not cheap, you know, especially if you're trying to have something that will last for a long time. You know, you're spending a lot of money on materials. And so I knew that I needed to have some other income coming in. And so I wanted to find other ways to put my creativity to use. So I think one of the driving forces as well, it's all about representation. I think I've talked about this in my work, but this particular platform allows representation particularly for my children, because they get into shops and there's hardly any black greeting cards, or greeting cards with, you know, brown faces on them, you know. And this thing of, you know, I remember like my son would get, what do you call it? He'll get birthday presents, and you know, there'll be like a little Caucasian boy skating, a little Caucasian pride. You know, I'm thinking, this is not him. You know, are the parents? You know what? You know, there's, because they don't. So it's not for them to think about. You know, because they haven't had to, particularly if they're Caucasian, they haven't had to think outside not being white. You know, because they think white, quote unquote, is the norm, as it were. So they don't really think of any other different. And I just felt for me that they needed to be something that is representative of my children, you know, for them to get a greeting card with a black face on it, you know, with a brown face on it, you know. Apart from the fact that they need that I needed to obviously get an income, that those other things were actually important. You know, initially I had put out some of my sort of older prints that I used to do, and I realized that was a totally different audience, you know. So I really had to understand what exactly I was doing. This audience is not going to spend £500 on a print. You know, that's not the audience I'm working with. This audience is the audience that just wants a little print in their house that costs like, you know, £10-15. And so I started designing things for that sort of audience, things that are just simple, that have a reference of Africa, a reference of my own heritage, me being playful with my art, and not necessarily having to tell, you know, have a 1,000-page thesis or something, you know, regarding why why there's a line here, or why there's a, do you know what I mean? Why
I love this. I love this thesis reference, and I mean, also making your work accessible to other audiences, and especially the little ones, because I think, you know, I was going to ask you, my next question is, you know, not to cut you off. If you haven't finished answering that other question about what inspired you, then continue, please. But my next question really is, how do we inspire the next generation of young artists, Black British or Zambian, Black kids in general? How do we inspire them? And I think you've touched a little bit on it already, you know?
I think we need to,
you know, to inspire them to sort of like think, I want to be an artist, you know, being an artist or a painter, is a viable career? How do we inspire them? I hadn't finished my
Your
question. I'm
question.
sorry.
Excuse me, sorry. I think we have to be strategic, you know, in about
Yeah.
what it is we want to say. I mean, I think even if I always say,
Yes.
"Oh, Dad, you shouldn't have," told me that art, is not a great career. But he was right to some extent. Artists
Yeah.
are still struggling to have an income. Especially now
Yeah.
with the current global situation. The creative
Yeah.
industries are really suffering to that extent, and so I think we those of us who are saying flying the flag for artists have to really be strategic in what it is that we are saying and doing,
Yes.
and the various options available for being an artist. So, for example, in my case, I can say yes, be an artist, do whatever paintings that the Sarah Forbes kinds of paintings, but do you have another way you're going to earn money? You may decide to
Yes.
get into teaching. That means, and
Yeah.
in addition to your artistic practice, make sure you've also got a teaching
Yeah.
qualification that sustains you. And a lot of artists do that, where they are teachers or academics, and they also paint.
Yeah.
You have to have something else apart from just the art. That's the truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because until you can get there, and there are very few people who get there, but it may take you 10 years to get there. So what are you
Yeah.
going to do in the meantime? So you need to have something else that is sustaining you financially, as
Yeah.
you're getting there, and have those sort of like plan A, plan B. What can I do in tandem, in addition to my artistic practice? Am I going to decide to be a teacher, an academic?
Yeah.
Am I going to get into research? Am I going to get into entrepreneurship? Let's say in my case, doing all this, shops on the side and stuff. You really need to be
Yeah.
realistic about that, about the world of art and what that means to
Yeah.
be an artist in
Yeah.
a particular climate. So what it means to be an artist in Zambia, that is a different context. What it means to be an
Context. Yes.
artist here in the UK, then there may be a bit more
Yeah.
opportunities, but in most cases, honestly, the truth is you need to have something else alongside before you can get to the to where you're selling for at auction for millions of dollars.
Of dollars.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, but you also have to be very so very strategic and do your homework.
Yeah.
Do your homework.
I love that. I think your father, if he's still with us,
Yes, he
or
is.
and he's going to hear this part. He's like, you see, I was right. This child, I was right. I was right about the career. But yeah,
but I think
I appreciate. No, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, it works differently for everyone, So in my
Yeah.
case, yeah, that's what needed. Other people, they need the career there and then, because they could have
Yes.
20 years of experience, which would have taken them right now to the stage of the Yinka, Shonibares, and the Chrysophiles, Whereas, so everyone has a different path, and I think it's good to have those people around you that guide you and mentors to sort of steer you in the right direction. So
yeah, I'm just really grateful that you were honest, because I mean, whether we like it or not, I mean, with this portrait for Sarah and the other work that you're doing, compared to like a kid in Zambia who will be looking up, they'll be like, you're an inspiration. I love that you've been honest, that you've said, be strategic, have a plan B, have a career. It's not a bad thing. It will help you get your material, it will help you. And you've said there's different paths. So I love that honesty. My final question, and we'll check, I could check later. I think somebody just dropped the question here for you. But my final question is, what's next for Hannah in the next couple of years? What's next for Hannah Uzor? What are you looking forward to? What big project, if you can tell us or share with us?
What's next? Lots and lots of painting. That's next.
Yay! Good. Good.
I do love history. I think history is one of my passions as well. And I think I was self-reflecting. And I remember my dad had said one time we had gone to the village and I had drawn the scene. We'd gone to the village for a visit, and come back into the city, and I'd drawn this village scene like exactly how it was. And I was thinking about how that for me was it was a personal recording of my own family history, you know. And I've been really big on that. And I look back over the things that I've sort of been drawn to. History is really important for me, and I think that drive for representation and the recording of history and bringing those stories from history into light is really important for me. And so I'm continuing my research. I definitely continue my research. I am trying to bring those stories from my research to light. So at the minute, I'm sort of spending my time in the Victorian era. I'm doing a lot of portraits on the people that lived in Victorian England. Part of my research, I mean, it does also include Zambian research, but there's so many layers to the Zambian context. You know, I've already got my books piled high, you know, in terms of Zambian history. And I think last time I'd gone to Zambia, I'd also got some books, you know. So so there's also that part of my life that's still very important to me. You know, obviously I'm Zambian, you know, so I need to be able to record some of the stories from history that I find and bring them to light. There's so many things, you know, that that are there for people to share, because I think one thing that we're learning now with the new technologies is trying to get things more accessible to different audiences in different ways, you know. So whether it's through, because the truth of the matter is all the Zambians are not going to travel to the Isle of Wight to see this painting. And even the people in England, you know, half of them are still complaining that, you know, because the Isle of Wight, you have to take a ferry out there. So they're still complaining, I'm going to have to take a ferry. You know, they're not really interested. So it's how to get these portraits and these stories and these histories accessible, you know. So whether whether or not it's in portraiture form, whether it's in film form, you know, in book form, you know, let's just get these stories out there, because we do have a story to tell and we have our own voices now. So it's time to speak up. And at least now the world is beginning to listen, because I think we have been, like Sarah's story, it's not the first time, you know, that her story has been told. There was a documentary about her, but I think now the world is ready to listen to these stories. And so I think it's a perfect opportunity to begin to speak out.
Yeah, I love that you said that your art or art in general, it's nice to look for different ways of delivering it. And, you know, there's a lot of inspiration to be drawn from that. I love that you are thinking ahead. How can I package this for this audience? And, you know, still maintaining your interest in history and the characters. I'm going to quickly look and see what question we've been left. Somebody wrote that she loves your work and everything you have achieved. And she's basically asking you the same thing I just asked you. What's next for you? Someone else wrote before, I think I missed it, but they were echoing the same sentiment, that they admire you and everything that you've achieved. So I think that's also nice. That's nice to read on this Instagram live. I don't have any more questions, and that wasn't the question, it was more of a comment. I want to thank you so much, Hannah. Thank you for making the time to speak with me. I appreciate it. I really do.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.